Life isn't fair. Justice is blind and dysfunctional. And some cops aren't smart and dedicated like on television. This is Who Killed Undiluted Hocus Pocus. This is kind of a news update edition of the podcast. So we'll, I got some meaty things to talk about, and I'll kind of give, there's no case updates today, there's nothing like that, but I'll kind of talk about where we're going with that and some housekeeping things. It's kind of a plan of action for today. Something on my mind, I frequently write about Jack the Ripper, everything from Ripper numerology to like Jack the Ripper baseball teams and things like this. But it's not like I have this obsession with Whitechapel murders. It's more that I have a heightened interest in the interest of Jack the Ripper, and just that they seem to be like those murders a flashpoint of crime reporting. I don't think there was anything quite like it, that journalistic hysteria that occurred in the late 19th century. Or was there? Before newsprint, I kind of imagine that daily information was conveyed a lot, not by newspapers, but like town criers and things like this. I grew up in St. John, New Brunswick. We even had a town crier, this guy named John with a raspy voice. In the HBO series Rome, if you've ever seen Rome, which is fantastic, it's like 2 seasons, really early HBO. So, a lot of violence, a lot of naked women, naked men. And in Rome, there's this wonderful device of the newsreader. He's like this robust orator who stands in the Capitol. He's like bellowing out daily events that are occurring in the Roman Senate. And even like the newsreader even has a sponsor. He's sponsored by the Brotherhood of Millers, True Roman Bread. And it's just this great plot moving device, whether it's historically accurate or not. It's probably not. It's another matter. Probably had something like that. But I, kind of the point is that ancient cultures must have had verbal devices to communicate information to the masses. And what would else, what would be the excuse for theater? And if you want a prime example of ancient bloodlust, you look no further than the Greeks. Whether you know it or not, the whole of Greek tragedy is comprised of under 40 plays written by 3 guys, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus. And these are like really nasty plays, right? There's regicide and infanticide, dismemberments, and there's even like the daily eating of this guy's liver by this big bird, by a vulture, in Prometheus Bound. And then if you jump ahead 2,000 years, you'll see like England compelled by the same like bloodlust. There's an overfocus on Shakespeare and the Elizabethans, but it's it's what came after the Jacobeans, who came after the reign of Elizabeth I, where you really see this gruesome spectacle. Some of Shakespeare's cruelest plays were written in the Jacobean age, not in the Elizabethan age. The Scottish play Othello, Measure for Measure, which is a pretty nasty play. King Lear, Measure for Measure's got incest. There's torture, the defenestration of Gloucester's eyes in Lear, the out-vile jelly. These gruesome indulgences were even more painstakingly explored in if you don't know him, the plays of like Thomas Middleton, of John Webster. John Webster wrote The White Devil, Duchess of Malfi. It's in Middleton's Revenger's Tragedy where you kind of see this greatest achievement. I was in a production of the Revenger's Tragedy, and it's got it all. It's got like mothers whoring daughters and sons raping mothers. There's castration, and it's like a bloodbath of executions. At one point somebody even arrives on stage with a severed head on a spike. Those Jacobean plays were largely dismissed by 18th and 19th century critics. They kind of saw them as crass and not really worthy of attention in the well-made play. And it's not until the Grand Guignol theater in the 1880s in Paris, France, where the emergence of Grand Guignol almost in perfect confluence with the emergence of Ripper lore, where you see this realization of grim spectacle again. If you've ever read Mel Gordon's Grand Guignol, Theater of Fear and Terror, I think the book is out of print now. He's a fascinating guy from San Francisco who wrote extensively about Grand Guignol and the extreme themes in those plays of vivisection and mutilation, insanity, sexual depravity. Of course, when Grand Guignol finally fell out of favor, as everything does, things move in cycles in the 1950s. The England's Hammer horror films kind of took up the mantle and took up the torch and continued. And you see this in everything from plays like or movies like The Woman in Black and Robin Hardy's The Wicker Man. If you've never seen The Wicker Man, you should see it. It's celebrating its 50th anniversary this December. And, all of this is kind of a perfect segue to mention again that I think last fall I had my friend Lauren Barnett on the show during Halloween to talk about her forthcoming book, Death Lines, which is sort of like walking tours of London horror. And that book is finally out. It was finally released in paperback. And there's a link on the website. There's also links here to if you want to explore Grand Guignol and Thomas Middleton and things like that further at theresaallore.com, TheresaAllore.com. Couple of notes. I'm going to kind of have to ghost you for a while, and we're probably going to go back to the publication of just the old episodes. It's moved now to every Thursday. The original season of Who Killed Teresa. Those will post every Thursday until July. I think we're halfway through. We're more than halfway through of a total of 46 episodes. So I'll kind of keep the burner on there for a while. I'll probably post every second week now, or podcast every second week, because I have to go back to editing. That case is not here. That deadline is, publisher's deadline is 6 months away and clocking, and I'm kind of feeling the pressure of that. It was nice to get away from it for a while, but now I need to get back to work on it and focus on it. A word about paid subscriptions, and this just occurred to me because somebody brought it up to me. If you feel like for some reason you should have access to premium content on the Substack, I'm at johnallore.substack.com, and of course there's you can subscribe for free. You get most of the content. Subscribe paid, you get a little additional content. We've talked about this, but if for some reason you feel you should be comped in as a free subscriber, because we've done something together, we've worked on a project in the past or something like that, just shoot me an email and remind me and make your case. There are several people who I omitted to do that for, who of course I would. You know, one of the people is someone who maintains my website, and they just kind of gently poked me and said, "Hey, you know," and of course, I felt terrible about that for the oversight. So if you're following the Substack and or subscribing, and you think you have a case, just email me, and of course I'll do it. I'm not aware of who listens, like hyper aware of who listens and who follows, the website or the Substack subscription or whatever. I don't painstakingly go in and review followers and things like that. I know some people do. Some people have to, right? This is more like a cottage side hustle for me. Others make a living from it, so or it's part of their second or third job. So I understand that, and I don't solicit my friends and families intentionally for this. I know, and I'm not knocking that. Some people do. It's their whole world, and it's just not my. My mother has no idea that I do this, right? My brother doesn't follow me. Why would he do that? Friends and families, I may have some people who do, and some people who don't. But I don't. I don't promote it like on my personal Facebook page or something like that. Occasionally, if I think it's something of broader interest, but I don't do it because I don't want to put my friends are my friends, and I don't want to put them in an awkward position, which it could be because a lot of them know me from high school and college and things like that. They have a different relationship with me, than John the crime guy, and so I don't really. There are others who do know me, from those realms, and know me as John the crime guy, and choose to follow, and that's cool too. I'm fine with either, but I've never wanted to push it or press it because I would hate to lose a friendship over that. My friends are my friends, so and how they choose to approach and get to know me and interact with me is partly their choice. So that's the reason for that. And I say that because if for some reason I blanket included you on a mailing list and then you dropped me, not only would I not be offended, I wouldn't be aware of it because I don't go in and meticulously look at my lists and who opened all posts that I've made and who's only opened 20. Why would anybody put themselves through that? Ridiculous. So I don't I don't do that. All of that is a roundabout way to say again, there's some key people, like people who worked with me on Wish You Were Here, and people who worked extensively, like assisting me with the project Quebec. People who are now working with me on That Case Is Not Here. And of course, I would never presume to charge them money for that. The rest of you, however, come on, chip in, buddy. Anyway, I've wrung all the moisture out of that. Let's move on from it. Some reminders: if you missed the interview I did with Ben O'Hara Byrne on A Little More Conversation, it's in this post. There's a link to that interview. I don't know. It's 20 minutes. From the onset, we got together and I said to him, "What do you want to do?" And he said, "Well, what do you want to talk about?" And I said, "Well, I can tell you what I don't want to talk about. I don't really, I'm not jazzed about talking about my sister's murder case. If you go down that road, particularly the road of the first book, you're going to find me a really bored interviewer." And he said, "Okay." And lights, camera, action, and that's exactly the road he goes down. Right? It's sort of like, okay, when did you learn that she was murdered, and how did you meet the love of your life, Patricia Pearson, which is not true, right? And how did you two get together? And tell me about the suspect you focused on. And I was nodding off. And it's nothing against Ben O'Hara Byrne. I found him to be a lovely guy. I just wish it was a different line of questions. But anyway, nevertheless, there it is. If I appear to be disengaged, that's why. The second thing is the Crime Junkie podcast that they did, which is terrific, which is all that, and I'm fine with it. Because I didn't have to do anything. They covered the case on their own, and ran with it, and I didn't participate. So I'm fine with. You can talk about dragging out the entire plot of the 1978 Eastern Townships murders. You do that to your heart's content on your own time. I don't want to do it. Some guy emailed me yesterday, peppering me with little questions about this affair. It was Friday and it was after 3, and it was all I could do not to say, you know what? Grapefruit League baseball is on, and I'm out. I'm like, I don't care, Mac. Because the Padres and the Seattle Mariners, two West Coast teams I couldn't give a rat's ass about, are on the television, and there's been no baseball for 6 months, and right now it's the most important thing in my universe. What was that you were saying about an unsolved murder? Forgive me, I'm quite punchy. Anyway, Crime Junkie, listen to the show. I thought Ashley and Britt, I think it is, did a fantastic job. I didn't know it's the number one, or practically the number one, true crime podcast in North America or the world or something like that. I had no idea. But there it is. Time to play the game. Time to play the game. Where I am gonna get on a soapbox and be a little more serious about here is I want to give some oxygen to a couple of articles that appeared last month in February in the Quebec French language newspaper La Presse, focusing on law enforcement's use of genetic genealogy to assist in capturing criminals. And again, I've posted links to those articles on the website, teresaallure.com. If you don't speak French, just run them through a Google Translator or something. Because if you're interested in this arena, they're really interesting. You know this. It's almost a daily occurrence now that cold cases in the United States are solved using this technique. And these are really old cases, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And I choose those dates intentionally because they're in print here, and there's links to cases practically within the last week, 30, 40, and 50, that were solved using genetic genealogy. And people in Quebec are beginning to question why the Sûreté de Quebec has had a cold case unit for almost 20 years now and have yet to solve a crime. And the Guyenne Potvin case does not count because that case has not survived the acid test of a trial. We know what can happen when a case like that goes to trial. The James Dubé case was thrown out. For a while, they had that on their website as a victory, and they had to take it down because on appeal the case was lost. And right now, James Dubé's case is technically unsolved, although I think everybody sort of suspects that his former spouse committed the murder. So this article in La Presse, I was quoted in it, and what I said was that Quebec police forces have, quote, thrown away, misplaced, or destroyed a number of objects containing DNA linked to crime scenes over the years, including murders, which could limit the scope of the use of these techniques for many files. And then the La Presse article continued, for example, Desiderio du Quebec in Sherbrooke told me that my sister's underwear had been destroyed 5 years after the murder. And then the article says, and his case is not isolated, adds Mr. Allure. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've spoken to so many families of victims who have been told the same thing. The DNA is no longer there to be analyzed, says Allure, who also hosts the podcast Who Killed Teresa, which focuses on solved murders in Quebec. Hey. I'm happy if they can help solve crimes, but I'm not holding my breath, Allure said. So there's nothing new here. I've said this. I've squawked about this issue for years. And what I'd say is that the Quebec police are playing poker in the genealogy game, and they're not holding any cards. More interesting than the first article, which featured me, is the second article that came out on this subject that does not feature me. It's the one most people missed, and they shouldn't have. In the article, the Laboratory of Judicial Sciences and Legal Medicine of Quebec, the LSJML, they've always got these massive titles with unmanageable acronyms. Anyway, the LSJML was being, quote, hopeful of new techniques, but then they turn around in the article and hedge their response with the acknowledgement that the science was, quote, quite complex. And then the piece went on to catalog like a whole host of techniques available in Quebec, techniques that you all know, because by now most of the lay people are experts in this: genetic genealogy, phenotyping, DNA networks, patron Y chromosome, rapid DNA, which we've talked about. But then they failed to mention whether any of these techniques were currently being deployed in the province, which is maddening. The point is not what is available. The point is, are you using them? And linked to that, of course, is the elephant in the room. Is what was missing in the article is any mention of Quebec law enforcement's endorsement of the techniques in conjunction with this legal body, the LSJML. So it's this maddening game of three-card Monte where Quebec law enforcement continues to stall in their shirking accountability dance. But what I say is that sooner or later the music's going to stop, right? And we're going to know that they're not holding any cards. To borrow a phrase from a scientist from another discipline who very similarly felt like he was chasing windmills, no one's minding the store. They're all asleep at the switch.
Looks like you're going to lose your shirt, kid.
Good luck, kid.
Ace. The kid's got it. All he needs is an easy 10 for a royal flush. Looks like the kid hasn't got it after all.
Skittle poker from Aurora. Sometimes you win.
And sometimes you lose your shirt.
I bring all of that up because obviously I'm frustrated by it. And, I'll just tell you, I'm working with two television producers, one in Canada and one in the US. And if you want more on that, you're going to have to be a paid subscriber, because for paid subscribers, I've already revealed the details of this in a separate post. But for now, that's all you really need to know. And it's a constant struggle with them trying, I guess I'm not expressing myself correctly because, it's, at one point somebody said to me, what's all this trash talking against the Quebec police? It's not trash talking. It really is. And anyone who takes it that way, maybe I'm not, as I say, I'm not communicating myself as precisely as I should. I think I've said very, very clearly that at this point, I'm of the belief that my sister's case wasn't solved because of the obstacle of the police, because they stood in the way of a proper investigation, because the lead suspect in the case was a police informant. And to expose the police informant would have compromised their work with him, and therefore Teresa's case had to be sacrificed for the greater good. That's not trash talking. That's just that's grounds for a wrongful death suit. Quite frankly, if I were litigiously inclined, that's grounds for a unlawful death suit against Quebec law enforcement. And it's not trash talking. And I am not, again, anti-law enforcement. As I've said before, and I sort of said to this producer, I'm currently working with two police agencies in two very different states in the United States. One in New England and one in the Midwest. And they couldn't be more different. One is a bluish state. One is a red state, which I don't give a shit about. I don't care about that stuff. And they have been gems. They have been respectful, diligent, cooperative, and equally, I've been a prince with them, working with them, because there's this kind of mutual understanding, which I've never experienced. All I experience with Quebec law enforcement is insecurity. And a general feeling that they know they don't know what they're doing. Full stop. And that is the frustration. So it's not trash talking the Quebec police. I've done it before out of frustration. I don't particularly like myself when I do it, but there's no acrimony against any individual. Even with the force, we're talking about professional matters, and we're talking about a very old institutional problem that no one else seems to want to even discuss. It's sort of kind of left, well, that's just the way it is. That's the way it is with your law enforcement agency? I don't think so. But by way of example, I'll just tell you, at some point last year, the folks from the Paula Zahn show that on the Discovery Channel approached me, and there were several overtures, and there was some work done around that about possibly being featured on the Paula Zahn show, and I'll just tell you, I don't think Paula Zahn and I are going to be working together. Because their first position was, we're very pro law enforcement. We want the interview with them, and we want their opinion on it. And I was like, well, then we have nothing to talk about, because that's not this case. And I understand how that works into your formula. A very plot-driven approach to true crime, which follows a judicial process, which, frankly, to me is a very artificial process. It's very linear, and it's meant to express facts to the lowest common denominator in order to get finally arrive at a yes or no answer in a judicial process. And all of that may be true, and the forces within that, the coroner, the prosecutor, the defense attorney, the judge, the police force, are all working at that very fundamental level. But that's not the way behavior works. So that is not a proper articulation of how crime works. So if you're taking the plot journey of the crime, the arrest, the judicial process, the sentencing, that is a reality, but it's not the most fascinating reality to me about how murder functions. But it's the one that 90% of these shows focus on. And it's just the wrong model. It's the wrong model. Behavior, how a victim and an offender come to interact are infinitely complex and more interesting than that. And I would say that is where me and the Paulizans of the world part company, because we have nothing to discuss, because it's they want to simplify something that cannot be simplified. That's it. That's my soapbox. If you like the podcast, subscribe on Substack, johnallure.substack.com. You will get a commercial-free version of this podcast and other information. You'll get to hear who I'm working with. 2 programs, one coming out, I believe, in March, one coming out at the end of the year. You can follow us on social media. I am on all of them. Just look for Allure or Teresa or something like that. And Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, etc., etc. There's always the old standby, the website, teresaallure.com, TheresaAllore.com. That's all for this week. I thank you for listening. Thank you for being a listener and an engaged advocate. It is much appreciated. That's it. I'm out. Thank you for listening. This has been Who Killed Teresa. I'm your host, John Allure. Have yourselves a great, great day.